How did I become a literary agent? More importantly, you might be asking yourself how you could become a literary agent. My name is Michael Carr with Veritas Literary, and this is How to Hook an Agent. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get into the industry. It's a question I get asked a fair bit. A lot of times people are just curious about it. I don't know. Some people, I think, are kind of wondering how they could do it. To be honest, it's a pretty awesome job. I get to work with books all day. I get to work with writers, editors, publishers, all the people who you probably remember from your childhood who were always with their nose stuck in a book. That's my day-to-day life. So it's pretty good. And I can understand why people are interested in that aspect of things. So I have to be honest with you, it really is not very easy. My own path started off through writing. I had never actually thought of being an agent. I was actually more interested in editing. I had worked on a student magazine in college and thought that if the writing thing didn't work out, I might end up going off to New York to work in editing. I don't know. That didn't actually happen. And there was a period of time, 11, 12 years ago, where I was starting to get really frustrated with the writing process, or my writing career, or more specifically, my lack of a writing career. I had sold some stuff, some professional short stories, had a piece appear in the Atlantic. So I knew that I had some degree of ability that I had developed, but it just wasn't getting me over the hump. And I had done some freelance developmental editing. So dev editing is the sort that's not focused necessarily on correcting at the sentence level, but correcting scene and plot and that sort of thing. And have been credited in the back of a few books. And so I came across a project, a book by an aspiring writer who she had put up some sample work on a website and reached out to the woman who is my colleague now and said she might consider representing this person. And she did, sold it, and offered me a 25% finder's fee on this first contract. Well, as you know, any time anyone offers you money in this industry, you kind of got to take it, because anything creative for that matter, because sometimes it's hard to come by. This wasn't a lot of money, but it got me kind of my foot in the door. And as I found another project, and Katie at Veritas said, you should consider representing this yourself. I did. I took on a few more writers, and it happened really, really quickly on the one hand. On the other hand, it was a very slow process, because it was probably year 3 or year 4 where I was earning what could legitimately be called an income, and wasn't a little bit of money here and there, and most months nothing, right? Because it's going back to an analogy I'm using in another video. It's like planting the orchard, right? And some of those seeds just don't even take root. Others come up and produce one small fruit or two, and others turn into full trees. And you're hoping eventually to have this massive tree that can produce bushels of fruit. And that's how you make your living, is by having different things coming in at different times and having a share of foreign rights and audio. And when books are out, you then get a cut of the royalties and all those other things that you've worked on and negotiated and nurtured with your various writers. But that takes a long time, unless you just get extremely lucky right out of the gate and sell a book for $1 million, which is almost never going to happen. Then it's going to be really hard for you to earn a legitimate living at this. If you compare that to being, say, a real estate agent and taking a 6% commission, and you can, I'm sure, at least as many real estate agents join up and then drop out as literary agents, but the math at least makes a little bit more sense in the short run, where I can sell $300,000-$400,000 houses, $400,000 houses over the course of a year, and pull in enough of a commission to earn a living. Well, um, my cut is a higher percentage than it's, we take a standard 15%, and then a small amount of that goes to helping maintain the agency itself. But it's a higher percentage, but the contracts are typically much smaller. So recent contracts that I've done, leaving aside a couple of bigger outliers, are $10,000, 13,000, one for 15, one for 25, one for 5,000. Now hopefully that's not the only money you receive. Those are the advances, but as you can see, how many $25,000 first book contracts would you have to do over the course of your first year in order to earn a living? Well, it's going to be extremely hard, and it takes a long time to really get up and running. Everything moves so slowly. Just like with a writer, that contract pays out a third on signing, a third on delivery and acceptance, and a third on publishing. But you've got to have more of those. It does over time even out my income in a way that a writer's income isn't evened out, because I have a lot more people I'm working with, but it's the same sort of process. So how did I live on just an agenting income for the first 3 or 4 years? Well, I didn't, right? In fact, I would say that I still have additional income. My writing in most years it makes more than my agenting. So I'm trying to be transparent about that. I do have years where I could completely live off my agenting money, but that's not all the time, right? So I didn't. I owned an inn at the time. Ironically, just as I started agenting, almost simultaneously as when I started having success with writing, and it sounds like maybe I had a foot in the door, but it actually happened separately. One didn't have anything to do with the other. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone who I knew from the writing world that I was an agent, and I didn't tell anyone from the agenting world that I was a writer too. So it's still not something, if I go to a conference, it doesn't usually come up. I try not to mention it, in part because then people really sometimes really insist they must know what my pen name is. And it's not like it's a secret or anything, but I don't want it to be the focus, and I don't want to be talking about my own writing when I'm at an event as an agent. So I owned an inn. I owned an inn in Vermont with 16 rooms, and that was my living. And part of the reason I owned an inn is because I had been working in technology. Specifically, I was a programmer of simulators for nuclear submarines. Sounds more impressive than the day-to-day job, but I came home from work, and the last thing I wanted to do was sit down at a computer and start writing again. So I got an inn, and I owned the inn for 12 years. The last several years, I had someone managing it for me, so it required less work. But I was living on site and doing full-time innkeeping work. Now, the good thing about an inn in a ski area is you have a ski season, and you have summer and fall foliage, but there's like a 2-month break after ski season when things are really slow, and a 2-month break after the last of the colorful leaves have fallen, but before the ski industry really starts up again. That were ideal for working on first drafts of books. And also, that's when I would dig down and really focus on finding new writers. So, the 3 or 4 year process might have taken less time if I had actually fully devoted myself to it, but it also would have been a sense of panic, and I'm not sure without savings what I would have done. So this is a reality. If you meet a really young agent, there's a really good chance that he or she is moonlighting. I went to a conference a few years ago where I was at the bar after hours, and there were 4 of us there, and all 3 of them, the others, had jobs that they were working literally like bartending and other things like that. I don't begrudge them. In fact, if anything, I think that's fantastic, because I think one problem with this industry, and this is the same with writers, the same with editors, and the same with agents, is that people who come into the business with pre-existing privilege have a leg up. Nobody really wants to talk about that. Everybody wants to make it sound like they bootstrapped. But you'll find a lot of people who came with a trust fund or had some support from their parents. And otherwise, how do you start $35,000, $40,000 a year at a publishing company in Midtown Manhattan where you're expected to put in a lot of hours? Right? You can't live on $35,000 a year in Manhattan. Maybe if you have like 3 roommates and you bag lunch all the time. And there are people who do that. But a lot of people, when they start off, they either have to have a second job or they have to come into it with some sort of form of privilege. And to a certain extent, I came into it with some support too. The support was in the form of another job. And, I worked to get to that point. But there, if I'd had a different sort of job, could I have done that? So I hate to tell you this, but getting in part might depend on support from other people or from another job. The other person might be your spouse. It might be that you just get up every morning and from 4:30 to 8:30 every morning. Maybe you live on the West Coast like I do, and you can get a head start on the industry. And 4:30 to 8:30 every morning, you agent like crazy. You take your lunch hour break and you answer all those emails that have built up so that you don't, and then you read manuscripts in the evenings and on the weekends. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's going to be kind of hard, and it's going to be kind of a struggle to break in. It took me several years. To a certain extent, I'm still building with writers who are earning money from contracts we did 8 or 10 years ago, and always hoping that a number of writers I have, especially some of my favorites who are just great writers and don't quite have the great writers. They're really fun people to work with, and they haven't quite started selling at the rate they need to in order to get those bigger contracts and live their dream, which is probably to go full time too. Then I'm always hoping that some of those will break out, and there's always a chance. I've got movie options out, and maybe one of those will be made into a movie, and that person will become a mega bestseller. I don't know. But getting into agenting is a lot like becoming a full-time professional writer. Right? You might need to do some other things and use it as like a second job. If you treat it like a hobby, you're going to be one of those agents who falls out. Apart from that, it was kind of a little strange. At the beginning, when I first signed that, or went to go sign that first client that I was going to be doing myself, I told my colleague, I said, well, I don't really understand, I don't know that much about contracts. I don't have any contacts in the industry. And she said, well, yeah, it's the easy stuff, right? You can self-educate about contracts. I'll walk you through. She always walked me through contracts for several years. And even now I will occasionally, because she's, now got like 25 years or something of experience. More than that, I think. I think she had like 17 years when I got into it. So if something funny comes up, I can bounce it off her and say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Contracts are different. I'll reach out to her about maybe getting some contact in the industry or someone I don't know, or it's a little bit different project, or she's gone on submission more recently with this genre than I have, that sort of thing. But I self-educated, so we have a subscription to Publishers Marketplace, and I get on there and just really look at who was acquiring what. I would reach out to people whenever an editor wanted to talk to me about the list they were building. I would have that conversation and take notes. People are shifting around all the time, so you gotta keep doing research every single time. It's never the same thing twice. And then but the thing that she said is the important thing is, do you have good judgment for picking books that should be published? And I don't know if I did or not. I had a lot of misses, and I still have some misses. But I'm getting better at it with time, and I sell a higher percentage of books that I sign from debut novelists than I used to. And but I had done so much writing at that point and read so many thousands of books, and I uh, participated in workshops. I'd attended Clarion. There was a summer workshop I would attend in Toronto Islands with some very skilled writers, including a couple of professionals, Cory Doctorow, for example. And so um, I had a lot of contact with really high quality writing, and as well as amateurish writing, as well as writers who are on the cusp of being professionals and those who are a long ways away. And I had passed through a lot of those stages of writing myself. Um, and so I had a good idea. It was not a perfect idea, obviously, but so I would say if you really want to get into this and be a literary agent, you're going to have to kind of make yourself do that. Now, finding an agency who will take you on is another question, but sometimes we've had people come in who've wanted to read slush or who've worked for us for a period of time and who can get some education. Um, and we had a volunteer this last summer who was being compensated as an intern by her university, but for us was volunteering to do some reading and stuff. And she got some valuable education in the field. I don't know if that's what she's going to end up doing. And we don't usually, don't take this as an excuse to then, pitch me to be my assistant. I can't really afford it. I have to do all my own work myself, and I'm not someone who's going to take advantage of someone's free work either. So unless you have your own grant coming in from some other location, I would never be able to do that. So, I would say you're going to have to do it on sheer force of will. And one good thing is you can put out your shingle and call yourself a literary agent, and people will um, start sending you queries. I hate to say that because it happens a lot, and most of those people fade and crash and burn. But the best thing to do would be to start by educating yourself and learning everything you can about the industry. And if you can find a mentor, I know that's tricky, but I think starting with a mentor is crucial.